Okay, I see that we are live. Let's just wait a few more minutes for people to join, as we did say we would start at 3 o'clock. And then we can go ahead. We will start with a short, quick greeting from Linda Galanakis, who is the head of Rodin School. Thank you so much to her for being here. We also have Slim Tembu and Claire Hochstadter, who have joined us today as well. And a few members of the MUSE team, and we have Lafayette Hamilton helping us behind the scenes as well. So thank you everyone for being here. Let's just wait a few more minutes, as I said, for 3 o'clock, and then I think let's go ahead just to keep time. Okay, I see it is 3 o'clock. Linda, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Tabile, and your team for this wonderful initiative. And to everybody that's joined today, welcome. I'm sorry that we can't be on campus at Rodin, but we look forward to welcoming you on the campus very soon. And I wish you a really, really wonderful course and your sessions. I hope that you learn an immense amount from this. And I know that Claire Hochstadter is going to spend some time talking too today. So I think you're going to get an enormous amount out of this, the sessions. So to everybody, have a fantastic program and good luck. And thank you once again, Tabila, for everything that you've done. And take care.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much. So yes, welcome everyone to the first session of the program. Thank you so much for being here. I know you could have been anywhere else in the world, so I really, really appreciate it. We as the whole team who have put this together, we appreciate it more than anything. And I think it's just such a, it speaks a lot to your character, the fact that you've taken the time to take part in this initiative. I really, really appreciate it. So today's session will be run by Slim Tembu and Claire Hochstadter, who will be teaching us, various things about gender-based violence. But after this, we'll be going into, in the following sessions after this, we'll be going into a more engaging mode, where we are having conversations around gender-based violence, talking amongst each other as participants, and we'll be really just tackling it from all angles possible. But then after, on top of that, we will be using 3 sectors, as you guys know, being technology, policymaking, and film and media. And we'll be using them to see how we as young people in South Africa, as young people in the world, can help the situation of gender-based violence in South Africa. So this is the start. I'm very, very excited. I think let's keep questions to the end. Sliente, do you want to have questions as we go, or should we keep them to the end?
Yeah, sorry guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is everything good? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think, Claire, unless you feel like questions should be in the end, but I think perhaps in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Then okay, then when you're done, we can definitely do questions, a quick Q&A. But other than that, you guys can take it away. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So yes, hi everyone. So I'm sure when it comes to gender-based violence, there's a lot of discussions. You're looking at the news and you're thinking, what's going on, what's happening, and so forth. Sorry, I completely forgot that I need to share my screen. Let me quickly do that so we can just get into
Sorry, would you like
the
me to do the presentation for
yeah.
you? The
Oh yeah,
screen
yeah,
for
yeah.
you?
That would be great. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Tabi.
sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yes, everyone. So we looking at the news and, we're thinking, oh my gosh, what's happening? There's a lot of news about gender-based violence. There's a lot of news about, women carrying placards and pretty much just putting themselves out there and letting the world pretty much know that their bodies are not something to be tampered with, and we shouldn't, take it as a light issue. We're seeing deaths, we're seeing all these things that are happening, and there's a lot of stir, and there's a lot of need for the government to be present and to actually act against GBV. So looking at all these things that are happening, looking at the news, looking at what we see on YouTube, now we're just wondering, what is GBV? Why is it such a epidemic? Or rather, I would say it's a pandemic rather. So what is it all about? So Claire and I are going to go into the nitty-gritties of gender-based violence. And so, yeah, guys, I hope that you guys are informed and also just enjoy the session as well. So if we can just move to the next slide, just looking into what is GBV. I'm just waiting for the next slide.
Sorry, mine is a technical issue.
No problem, no problem.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you so much, Tabi. Okay, so the UN regards gender-based violence as an act likely to result to physical, sexual, or psychological harm. And if you can just look at the definition in itself, the infliction of harm can be in the private or public sphere. And we frequently see this in communities, in our families, and what it essentially includes could be, the sexual abuse of female children. It could be marital rape. It could be female genital mutilation. It could be, non-spousal violence perpetrated or condoned by the state. So these are kind of nitty-gritties that are involved in GBV. So we'll look into more into the how and looking into also the who is victimized. And as you can see in those pictures, you have, for instance, men are, raising their voice or inflicting harm on women. So you have this characterization of gender-based violence being that men perpetuate violence, and that's predominantly what happens. We're also looking into also various ways in which boys, specifically boy children and men in concern with the LGBTI community also can be victims of GBV. So let's just look into more into the what. So what is gender-based violence? You can just move to the next slide. Thank you so much, Tabi. So violence that occurs behind closed doors, violence that is carried out by partners or family members. This can be physical, emotional, or sexual violence, or sexual abuse. So sexual violence is any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person, regardless of their relationship to the victim in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. So it's unfortunate in South Africa that we are more predominantly facing this issue of sexual violence. And so there's problems of the rape culture that we see in SA. We see all these news reports, as going back to what I was saying in the beginning, we're seeing a lot of images and a lot of, clapbacks on these issues of sexual violence. If we can just move to the next slide. So another form of GBV is structural violence. So structural violence is where violence is built into structures, appearing as unequal power relations and consequently as unequal opportunities. Now, structural violence exists when certain groups, classes, genders, or nationalities have privilege again access to goods, resources, and opportunities over others. So we really do see that when you look into structural violence has been something that is an historical issue. We see women who haven't had the rights to vote, for instance, because it's been institutionalized by the states that there's this power dynamic that men could vote, but women couldn't vote. So we have something that has been institutionalized, condoned by the state. If you have to look into, it speaks about, classes or groups. If you look into racism, for instance, at one point in the essay, there were certain races that were unable to receive certain privileges. And this sort of issue of an unequal, imbalance, and this sort of unequal power dynamic that occurs between, for instance, the Black and white race. And when this unequal advantage is built into social, political, and economic systems that govern their lives, so this is a form of governing your life, you're unable to have certain opportunities. Women don't have the same pay as men. Women don't have the same opportunities, job opportunities as men. So these are the issues that we find in indirect structural violence. So because of the ways in which this violence is built into systems, political and social change is needed over time to identify and address structural violence. So that's something that we have to look into, looking into systems, looking into organizations, looking into businesses that cater to predominantly hiring men instead of women. Let's challenge them. Let's challenge also the political structure as well. Are there more female MPs? Is there an equal amount of members of parliaments than men? Like, is there a power imbalance? Should we challenge it? Should we question on what we can do as society to help address the issue of structural violence? So thank you. If you can just move into the next slide. So now the who. Now anyone can be a victim of gender-based violence, though statistics shows a high number of women and girl children who have been abused predominantly by men. And we see this in essay of sexual violence, often occurring that rape is inflicted on women and girl children, and that has become an epidemic in our case. So cases have shown that GBV occurs in homosexual relationships as well, particularly men who have been abused by their partner, as well as lesbian relationships where women can also be abused by other women. So you have an issue where even in these relationships within the LGBTIQ community, you have partners abusing each other. And you also have a situation where GBV is often experienced by people who are not seen as conforming to their birth-assigned gender roles. So in a case where a heterosexual man, for instance, abuses a homosexual individual, he may abuse a homosexual male because he is not assigned or not exactly behaving in a way that is normal in the sense in which in the heterosexual spectrum that he is behaving outside of the kind of aggressive, kind of masculine behavior that is normalized in heterosexual males. As well as abuse can be taken in terms of like heterosexual males abusing women who identify as lesbians in the LGBTIQ community, where they find that by abusing them, they're trying to straighten them up. And what we mean by straightening them is that, by, for instance, sexually abusing a woman that is lesbian or in the LGBTIQ community, it's a way that these heterosexual males feel that they need to sort of straighten them to make them, straight, to make them heterosexual again. So these are the kind of issues that we find in concern with who is abused. At the same time, as we spoke about with girl children who can be abused, boy children as well are people, examples of how they're abused as well, sexually by their uncles, their fathers, even emotionally abused, physically abused as well. Yes, next slide. Now let's look into intimate partner violence. So a lot of the times we know that when it comes to gender-based violence, it can occur either within relationships or outside of the relationship. So IPV abuse that occurs, so it's abuse that occurs in a romantic relationship, current or former intimate relationships. These can be heterosexual and homosexual relationships as well, as we spoke about in the previous slide. And IPV can coexist in any relationship, but largely evident in relationships where, for example, the man is the sole provider. The female feels trapped in the relationship because she is dependent on the man And the financial imbalance, for example, between the blesser and blessee creates an unequal relationship. So the blesser manipulates and abuses the blessee to gain predominantly sexual benefits. And we see this occurring in communities where women may not exactly have had opportunities or, you know, certain privileges in life, and find that by linking up with somebody that has those, you know, privileges, that has those opportunities, that, you know, perhaps they can also make it, they can also live that particular kind of lifestyle. We see this also in homosexual relationships as well, where you have an older man with, you know, a younger man who feels also, that younger man, that he can also gain certain privileges, things that he wasn't used to or didn't have the opportunities in his community, that he can hopefully gain those privileges by being with this older man. So these are the kind of things that we look into concern with the WHO and people that can be victimized or perpetrators in gender-based violence. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're looking to the where. So what we understand is that, which is such an issue, is that the WHO identifies GBV as a global pandemic in 2020. So that is a huge thing, because what we're seeing here is that 1 in 3 women will actually experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. I mean, you don't really like comprehend it unless you realize that, okay, wait a minute, if there was, you know, me and 2 other women with me, one of us would have had experienced gender-based violence. So that is a problem, and something that we actually need to take care of as a society as a whole. So 35% of women have experienced physical or sexual violence from intimate or non-intimate partners. 38% of murders of women are committed by intimate partners. And 200 women have undergone female genital mutilation. So that is a lot in concern with it being an issue and how it's taking place in various different parts of the world. You have countries like Afghanistan, India, South Africa, the DRC, where there are high rates of gender-based violence. And oftentimes, you know, with these countries, they're also they're countries that have a lot of conflicts. In concern with the DRC, Afghanistan, they are very much a high conflict environment, and that's often linked where conflicts and sexual violence or physical violence or anything of that nature that is involved in gender-based violence is linked to war-prone countries. Because we see that it's almost like it's bound to happen in these countries where there is countries that have conflicts, that are war-prone countries. There's a likelihood there's also sexual abuse that is taking place, or physical abuse or emotional abuse that is taking place in those countries. So that's why they have high rates of, you know, gender-based violence, and in various countries as well that occur, not only in, you know, third world countries, but in first world countries as well, where you have issues and high rates of GBV. Another aspect when looking into gender-based violence is in South Africa, where there have been reports released by the governments, and I think it was around early during the lockdown, where the presidents identified hotspots of gender-based violence during the time where in the lockdown, there was evidence that GBV was taking place. And they were taking place in communities in KZN, in Eastern Cape, in Gauteng, in Western Cape. So that is a really problematic issue. But we also shouldn't insinuate, because these high rates are taking place in predominantly township communities, when you look into KZN and Eastern Cape and so forth, we shouldn't insinuate that gender-based violence doesn't exist in suburban areas, just like how we can't insinuate that GBV doesn't exist in first world countries. So being mindful of gender-based violence and understanding that, you know, we have to be vigilant about, you know, certain instances where it can take place. It can take place in various communities, but also understanding that there are instances where it may be higher. So yes, let me go to the next slide. So apart from this, GBV can be experienced in your communities, in your workplaces, and also at school. So meaning that the victim or the perpetrator can be somebody that, and which is quite scary, somebody that for instance, especially when you look back into those statistics of 1 in 3 women would have experienced GBV. So there's a huge likelihood that somebody that you may know have experienced GBV. These can be people in your school, in your homes, your family mates, your friends. And so we were looking to the parts of why does gender-based violence occur and how can we manage it? How can we, in a way, help others who've either experienced it or are going through issues of that nature? So I'm just gonna, leave it here, and Claire will continue with those particular aspects of the how, of the why and how. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you can go to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So, I mean, it has been covered up until this point, but I think there is no perfect recipe. That sounds, and it's not the correct wording, but no, there is no set tick box system when it comes to GBV and GBV taking place within our lives or within other people's lives. But exactly as been mentioned, is there are certain factors that do tend to lend themselves to GBV rates. And as mentioned previously, the patriarch system is often integral. And this is a system that, exactly like it's been mentioned, is worldwide, was the norm for a very, very long time. And to even go against it and suggest that it's a system that doesn't have a role in today's society is potentially even a battle on its own. And this is, I mean, I think we're all very, very aware, but it really is, it's a system where men, through choice or through circumstance within society, have held primary power. And that primary power, which has been witnessed outside of the home and within jobs, within governments, within ownership, has automatically seemed to infiltrate into the family dynamic. We mentioned previously about the voting situation, about how women's right to vote only came through different countries. Some countries sadly still not there, but it was never an automatic right to vote. So the subconscious message from society that men have superior power has led or is directly linked to GBV cases. And obviously the idea of ownership, not just of property, but of members of the family within the property. And obviously with intimate partner violence as well, that's a huge part of it. Toxic masculinity, which is, I say, a fairly new term, and it really isn't when you delve into what it is. But I think it's become an everyday term that we are hearing more and more of, which is so valuable. Very often, if we don't hear terms or we don't hear information, we don't realize how much we actually know and understand about it. Toxic masculinity, by definition, is a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with or expected from men. And so often this is referred to as the concept of boys will be boys, or locker room talk, and the idea that inappropriate behavior or conversation is just part of genetic makeup. And I think in recent years, there really has been a significant move, not just to label it, but to call it out and to really understand that everyday behavior, although it may seem so small and so insignificant in that moment, the ripple effect and the consequence of it can be really significant. And, I was actually discussing in my class today with the students is we don't know anyone's backstory. We don't know what someone else is bringing to the table. And just through a derogatory term being used, or a so-called joke being thrown around, or a comment or water being thrown on a t-shirt, whatever the case may be, it is indicative of something so much deeper for both the person doing it, but also the person receiving it. Finances is huge. And And that's really come up actually the forefront, particularly in the last couple of years with COVID and COVID regulations. So it almost has two sides to it. The first one is the lack of economic resources that are available. And very often this is particularly the case when someone has had access to economic resources and they have been taken away. And that's why I bring up the example of COVID regulations and lockdown. If we look at the impact economically that COVID has had on homes and individuals over the last couple of years, there has been massive uncertainty behind closed doors in regards to financial security. And financial security is a trigger topic for depression, for stress, for anxiety and anger. And particularly when something is so out of our control, it can very often lead to GBV or intimate partner violence. The additional side of that is not having economic resources available and the desire to want them, the desire to better oneself. Again, it can lead to anger issues. It can lead to impacts within the home. If potentially a partner within the home starts earning more money than the man, it lends itself back to the patriarch system, anger, subconscious, loathing, depression, lack of control. Another side that kind of goes with the finances, and it's a little bit off topic, but it's worthwhile mentioning, is that very often we only hear about GBV when there is financial or economic resources to assist the survivor or the victim of the event. Many people, as been mentioned previously, do not have economic resources to support them correctly through the trauma. And as a result, it doesn't become, I'm going to use the word public. I don't necessarily mean public, but it's not something, the journey is not shared and supported. The more economic resources that are available, the cycle can be broken, not just for the victim, but all the perpetrator, because support and structures can be put in place to go forward. I think childhood trauma is huge, and I think I'm definitely no scientist, but it is ongoing research. I think is happening all the time, not just in regards to childhood trauma, but also womb trauma that you experience before even birth. And I think there's more and more research coming out that even the impacts of parents' lifestyle pre-birth or young childhood trauma. And I think they say, you know, we don't have conscious memory before the age of about 2, but subconscious memory is there from the very beginning, and habits are formed. And what we see around us and what we grow up with is deemed to be norm and appropriate. And it is incredible. If you think about your own journeys in your own home, and I can speak for my own, is I presumed my home was how a home should be. And in my opinion, I had a very safe, happy childhood. But if I was to explore that with someone, it's only through entering additional conversations that I would potentially find out that the norm for me is not the norm for someone else. And therefore, we potentially live with GBV or intimate partner violence because we don't know that it's not okay. And more than that, we sometimes don't know that it's actually happening. It can be so subtle. And I think when we think GBV, automatically we think rape and we think real severe sexual trauma. But gender-based violence, intimate partner violence can happen on a much more subtle, everyday way. And it often leads the survivor or the victim to really question whether it's truly happening or not. And that's one of the real concerns with GBV, is that it's often far further down the line where we have that pivotal moment or that light bulb moment when we actually realize that something isn't appropriate in our lives, because the norms that we've been living with, we've just presumed are the norms of society. Additionally, obviously with childhood trauma, is if a childhood goes through significant trauma and doesn't have the correct support to deal with that trauma, the knock-on effect has been proven to be significant. And that is with aggression, that's with alcohol and substance abuse, concentration issues, you know, forming strong, stable relationships. And all of those subcategories can also have a direct link to GBV as well. And I think it's quite apparent, you know, misuse of substance or alcohol abuse, lack of personal control within self, high stress, anger issues, it is only sadly going to end up in one way. If we can go to the next slide, please. And I think this is a really important thing when we talk about GBV, is our role in GBV. And it's always something quite hard to understand and quite hard to manage, because growing up and living in South Africa, you will hear GBV. It is, you maybe don't hear gender-based violence, but you will hear GBV, you will hear that rape, you will hear trauma, sexual assault. These become words that have been normalized within a childhood in South Africa. And a big part of normalizing language, as much as it is so incredibly valuable, like I spoke about with toxic masculinity, a big part of it is that we lose shock value. So we can have conversations about traumatic events without them having any conscious or subconscious impact on us. And the difficulty therefore is that we know it factually, but we can't empathize with the circumstance because we have lost that ability. For me, every individual under this sun, and it doesn't matter where they are, who they are, what their role is, I feel like it has to be, I don't think you're allowed to leave school until you fully understand concepts like gender-based violence. Because if we go, and school is so protected, and I appreciate we don't all love school, and I appreciate that a lot of school can be really tough for a lot of people. And I also completely acknowledge that school is not necessarily a safe place for everyone. But if we don't leave school empowered about issues such as gender-based violence, it is super hard to take that next step after school. Because as much as the freedom of university and work comes along, it comes along with its own power struggles. It comes along with increased anxiety, financial uncertainty. And if the foundation has not been laid when we are open to learning and where it is safe to ask questions, it is super hard to take that next step. So for me, our primary role is to absorb. And it's not just to absorb, but to share. So if we ever have the chance to have the conversation, to have the conversation. If we ever hear someone using a term incorrectly, it's to correct them, not in a negative and I'm better than you way, but in a case of no, going forward, make sure we're speaking about the same things, because the use of our voice is so, so valuable. One thing that always concerns me, and I've experienced it many times firsthand, is the role of friendship groups when it comes to gender-based violence. And again, I'm referring to school age students, which is where I work. But there is gender-based violence is huge and it is traumatic. But it is huge and traumatic, not just for the survivor, but all those that have any role in it. And very often that side of it does go unnoticed. And the friends of the survivor play a pivotal role, not just in supporting their friend and hopefully encouraging them to get the support and help that they need, but also taking cognizance of their own journey and what they are working through as a result. And it sounds so cliche to say this, but a true friend genuinely loves their friend. And the pain of their friend does, as a result, have a significant impact on their journey. So the role of a friend is twofold. Number one, for me, it is to be a safe place, but it is never, ever to be the solution bearer. And even as adults, it's potentially not even a role that an unspecialized adult would take on. You know, victims of GBV, intimate partner of violence, FGM, whatever the case is, it is very specialized, and there are correct channels to work with. And it is always my encouragement as a friend of someone is to seek support, not just for the person, but also for yourself. If I think about role of family, this is hard because, as has already been mentioned, sadly, a lot of gender-based violence happens within the so-called safety of a home. And that is, if you actually just stop for a moment and think about it, for me, that's soul destroying, because I am so fortunate that I get to go home at the end of the day to a safe place. And it's a safe place where I can just throw my bags down and I can open the fridge and I can be potentially the truest version of myself. There are many, many, many people that do not have that luxury, and it's a blessing that I know I just take for granted on a regular basis. The role of family for me is so incredibly vital, and if you are ever in this position or you know someone is, to have the support of family is invaluable. They are supposed to be the people that know you best. They are supposed to be the people that can support you, not just emotionally, but also financially as much as possible. So to have that connection with someone is so important. The real difficulty comes in is if the family is the perpetrator, it is incredibly difficult to speak up and speak out. And it's not just, you're not then just dealing with the gender-based violence itself, but obviously the knock-on effect of speaking out and the division that it causes. And I know for young students, potentially that is reason enough not to go to an adult or a family member that they trust. And that to me is a huge problem we have. And it's why, for me, schools and structured organizations need to step in, but they need to be so in your face that it becomes that automatic next step. And some schools are fortunate to have in-house psychologists, but many, many schools do not. And the same, I know private hospitals in South Africa, they have a rape crisis department, and it's not known and it's not understood. And I think one of the reasons that our reporting system in South Africa, our rates of reporting are so poor, is the idea of going through a particular trauma and then having to go and stand in a queue somewhere and go through it all again and talk about it. But there are organizations and there are structures in place that really can support survivors of GBV or intimate partner violence, but they're not always well advertised or well known, or there is a subconscious stigma attached to going to see a psychologist or going to speak to a particular organization or whatever the case is. And again, that's, for me, is a big part of our role. Is we need to start name dropping a lot more. We need to start taking the stigma out of calling Lifeline because you've got a concern or whatever the case may be. And again, even as I'm saying this, I'm aware that I'm almost in my mind thinking about, not worst case scenario, the very stark, obvious cases of gender-based violence. But it's when you're feeling unheard at home, or when you feel that your partner is treating you inappropriately, but you can't pinpoint it. There are people out there that to be spoken to and that can assist. and we need to make sure that we give them credit as well. Okay, is that the last slide? Yes, perfect. And I think just on that is, I think there, I mean, I was Googling the other day when we were putting this presentation together, the organizations that are available to help with gender-based violence or intimate partner violence. And there are hundreds and hundreds. Oh, I can put my camera on while I'm talking now with pleasure. I hope you can see me. There are so many organizations out there, but numbers aren't known, websites aren't known. And it's a huge pity, because the role that the internet plays in each of our lives every single day now, there is such scope for society to be so much more supportive than what it is at the moment. So I'm so grateful for a company like this to really be grappling with these issues, and to have young teenagers stepping up and getting involved. The cliche is that, you know, the youth are our future and all the rest of it, but our future is our own. But the youth have an incredible voice, and as much as there is a lot of rubbish happening, and I'm not disputing that, there are opportunities available today that weren't in place 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And to be able to embrace those opportunities and to start making changes, it can never be given enough credit, because everyday changes, you may feel that no one notices, everyone notices. I notice in the classroom when someone does something slightly different. So small baby steps on a daily basis are going to have a ripple effect and are going to make a difference. Okay, so that is our presentation. I'm not sure if there are questions at this stage for either of us.
Thank you so much. I personally thoroughly enjoyed that session. I learned so much about so many different things, different terms, different ways of thinking. It really got my mind going, which I think just goes to show the power of conversation. You know, even though this program is very, you know, action oriented, you know, actually do something, I think we must never take away the value from how much impact conversation can have. So thank you so much for all of that to both you and Slee. I haven't got any questions that I have seen come up. But I've got my own. Maybe I'll open up the floor and then people can maybe ask as we go. Otherwise, we can definitely just move on from there. So my question is really, it's very, very simple. And I feel like it's just that I struggle to wrap my head around it. I don't know why I can't figure this out. But for me, the thing that makes gender-based violence is specifically the fact that it's gender-based. Right? So in my mind, it's a thing of, it's gender-based violence because you have some sort of advantage as a result of your gender. So in situations like, I think Slee mentioned earlier, a situation with, you know, homosexual relationships, for example, where, you know, it's man on man violence, woman on woman. But why does that count as gender-based violence if they're both the same gender? Because in my mind, it's a thing of, you know, I understand things like even structural violence, because, you know, you can have the fact that it's a man's world. And, you know, as a woman, you know, there are so many things where you can be taken advantage of because you just don't have the privilege that men have. So in situations like that, in homosexual relationships, you know, in general, can women really be the perpetrator of gender-based violence? Because I can't honestly, if I'm being honest, I can't think of a situation where women are at an advantage because of their gender. So that's the question I have.
Lee, do you want to answer?
Yes. Now, Tabi, honestly speaking, I was really grappling with this question as well, because when I was researching about GBV, especially because I looked into gender-based violence, and also, as you said, the gendered aspect in it. Like, then we wouldn't call it gender-based violence if the gender aspect wasn't included. And so it's, it's almost like looking at racial tensions, when I remember somebody said that, and a lot of people are saying that, Black people can't be racist because of the historical injustices that has put us in a place where the position of privilege is mainly on a certain group, on a white group, than on a Black group. So there's those kind of issues that we have where we're looking into the historical understanding of GBV, which is that it was predominantly men had this position of power, likewise in a historical position of Black and white imbalances, where white individuals had a position of power. And so in seeing how gender-based violence is being broadened, or rather, I guess you can also equate it to the concept of race being, or racism being broadened to, for instance, Indian people can also be racist to Black people, as you can see in the issue of the July unrest and KZN and what's happening there. And all these kind of sort of notions of, okay, it's not necessarily that the definition has completely shifted away, and that we are not essentially looking into the historical dilemma, or rather even the contemporary dilemma, that it's predominantly men, exercising that particular kind of, abuse towards women. But I think it's more of almost broadening the issue. And again, going back to what I was saying about how even Indian people in that particular scenario are, I guess you can say, seen as perpetrators of racism towards Black individuals during that whole July unrest. And so I don't know, like for me, and Claire, you can also just see how you kind of understand this, but I think the way I see this is that I'm still understanding the primary sort of notion of GBV, which is that it is gendered, it is patriarchal, and that historically, and we see it now, that women are still at a disadvantage. But at the same time, also recognizing that because the definition is almost broadened to a point where it becomes an umbrella term for other various issues that we see, whether it's homosexual, partners that are abusing one another, or what it may be. And so I think I don't know if I'm making sense, but still seeing the reason, the predominant or primary understanding of GBV, but also seeing how it has broadened to involve these kind of different aspects of violence. Likewise with the whole racism notion, where aspects of also other races could almost exhibit a form of hate speech to another race, or whatever it may be. But again, that's also quite a controversial topic, which can be extended further. But yeah, no, Claire, I don't know if you want to add.
No, I agree. I think a lot of it for me comes down to exactly like you say, the redefining of gender. Gender is not what it used to be in today's society. And I think for me as well, it goes further, and it's understanding cause and anger and frustration within self-identity within gender as well, which is why I think within same-sex relationships, it is becoming more prominent, not necessarily for a power dynamic, maybe for an aggression or a disappointment or a frustration that is automatically being umbrellaed around a particular gender. So I think it always has been a power dynamic, but I think over time that is shifting as well.
No, thank you to both of you. Sorry, am I echoing? Oh, okay.
No,
okay, great.
fine.
Thank you so much to the both of you. That makes perfect sense to me. I think that's something that I've been grappling with so much, and it's been confusing me so much. You know, as much as I've been in this gender-based violence, you know, area and for a fairly long time, you know, it's something that just hasn't made sense to me because of things like the fact that, you know, gender roles and this whole, just how everything has evolved with time, and how, you know, anyone can identify as a woman and anyone can identify as a man, and, you know, so many different aspects. So thank you so much for answering that. I don't know if anyone else has a question that they want to ask. It's definitely a safe space. I was so scared to ask that question, but I think it's a very safe space. Ultimately, we're all just here to try and learn as much as possible, and, you know, tackle anything that we might, you know, not be sure of, or if we want to get the opinion of anyone. But if not, you can definitely put your hand at any point if you have a question. But if not, thank you so much, Slee and Claire. I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to prepare, to research, to make the presentation, you know, all of the above, because I know that you had a million other things to do. So thank you so much for doing this. It was an amazing way to kickstart the program. And I guess to just inform the participants a bit more about what we will be doing going forward. Basically, the next session will be more of a conversational session. So we'll be engaging a lot more with the topics that have been brought up today, but also any topics that have been brought up in the past that you might think of in the moment. And we'll really just be talking about it together and figuring it out together as we go. And, you know, we might not find the answers to everything that might come up, which I personally love, because it means that we really thought of, you know, things that we haven't spoken about before and all of that. But it will be a session where we're basically just talking, sort of an icebreaker, where we're also getting to know each other a bit better, and all of that. So I'm personally very, very excited. And yeah, after that session, we'll be going into a more research phase where we'll have different speakers from the sector that you have chosen. So from the 3 sectors, you'll choose a sector and you'll have speakers coming in telling you about what their sector has done about gender-based violence. For example, Gwena Moloto, he is the PR counselor of the city of Tshwane metropolitan. Sorry. Gwena Moloto will be speaking to us about the policymaking sector. So, you know, things like that will form part of the research phase. But on top of that, we'll be doing our own research on the internet, on, you know, whatever resources we have access to. And then after that, which is the part I'm most excited about, is we'll be coming up with our own solutions. So we'll be working together, given the knowledge that we gained from this session, the knowledge that we gained from the conversations, the knowledge that we gained from the research, from engaging with people who are in the industries. And then we will come up with solutions that we think are original, solutions that we think aren't there. And then we'll turn those visions into life to our best possible ability, using the resources that we have access to, the networks we have access to. And we as MUSE are going to be helping you along with that, alongside the mentors, the amazing mentors who have agreed to help us out with this program. I am so excited. I really think it could be something so amazing. And I'm really excited to see what you guys have got and to see what you guys can create, and what can come out of this session. And then it will end on June 16th, which is Youth Day. And given the fact that it's Youth Day, we have to make something of it, obviously. So that is also going to be a very exciting session, where we will be reflecting on just this whole journey. Obviously, this is just the beginning. We'll be reflecting on how we've grown, what we've learned, and what we're going to do moving forward as young people. So I'm really, really excited. I hope you guys are too. If anyone has any questions, comments, things that they think, you know, the things that they want to say, absolutely anything, you can definitely reach out to us. I have all of your contact details, so I think you have mine as well. You can definitely just message me, call me, email me, whatever is most convenient for you. But other than that, that is it. I don't know if anyone else has any last minute comments, questions. Another note is we do understand that this is obviously a very sensitive topic. And, different people have been affected by it in different ways, if, that is the case. And we are, as MUSE Africa, going to, send out as much information as we can in terms of how you can get professional support, because as Claire mentioned earlier, that is quite important, just to address it and to, get the support that you need to deal with it properly. We definitely would love to assist in whatever way we can by sharing that information in terms of people to reach out to and all of that. So we will be sharing all of that, and then you can share that with whoever you think might, need it. But other than that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm so looking forward to the next session, and we can wrap up early, I think. And I hope you'll enjoy the rest of your afternoons. Great, thank you so much.